Here we go.
Fine.
I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Wellington Village Council for Tuesday, May 14th. If you could all please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me. And I've got some kids here that did a tour of the Village Hall, and they're going to come up with us. Come on up, kids. Come on up. It's okay, even if you're tall kids. Tall kids are okay, too. Because you guys know the words, so we always like to have you come up with us. No? Okay. And then if everyone could please remain standing after the pledge for the invocation. Is Josh Monty here, pastor from New Sound? His associate is. Okay. Okay, so he's going to be doing the invocation afterwards, so if you could please stay standing after the pledge. And kids, the flag's right here. Start us off. Say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, then come up here. We're going to do a quick picture, if we could. If Mom's has a camera, we'll do a quick picture of you up there, okay? Come on, council members. We don't always have kids here, so. All right, thank you very much. And now we have another pastor from New Sound who is going to come up and give our invocation. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tucker Owen, and I'm associate pastor over at New Sound Church right up the street here at Wellington High School. Honor, pleasure to be here. And so come in, and I'll just bless you guys real quick. Father God, thank you so much just for today. God, thank you just for everything that you do for us, God. The blessings that you continue to pour out over South Florida, specifically Wellington, God, we're so thankful for that. God, I just pray a specific blessing over every single person in this room, God. Specifically, we have our officers here who are in the line of duty every single day, and the volunteers, Father. I pray that you protect them, that you continue to walk with them, God, and that you bless every single step that they have out in the line of duty for us, God. We're thankful for their service. God, thank you for giving them that passion. God, thank you for the passions of the people in this room to make Wellington a better place, to continue to make it grow. Father, I pray that every decision is in alignment with you, God, and that you continue to bless all of them before you bless me, God. We love you, and we thank you for everything that you've done, sending your son on the cross to die for us, the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you, God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed the tour. You can stay if you like, but you certainly don't have to. They hardly ever do, for the record. Mr. Schofield.
Brings us to the adoption of the agenda. We're recommending adoption as presented, although we would like to take public comments on the consent agenda before we vote on that, because there are comment cards for 6G and 6J.
Okay.
And then and I would recommend we do the public forum immediately after consent agenda. There are a number of cards on Rustic Ranch roads, so we should hear those residents first.
Okay, so we'll take public comment at the beginning of the public forum and at the consent agenda. Is there a motion on that?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that gives us our agenda to work from. Now we have presentations and proclamations. Mr. Schofield?
All right, and the first item under presentations and proclamations is council recognition of Volunteer Sergeant Kenneth Finkelman and Volunteer Captain Chet McCarthy for their volunteer awards. And as you can see, we are well represented by citizens volunteers here. And who's going to, what my agenda doesn't say is who's going to present that.
Captain Silva, could you come up and just kind of give us a little overview on what we have in our audience what we have in our room right now? Because it's pretty impressive. And at the Volunteer Service Awards, they were recognized. So I think having you describe it would probably be a lot more accurate.
Thank you, Mayor. Needless to say, we really appreciate these ladies and gentlemen who give of their time to help with the overall mission of trying to keep the village of Wellington as safe as it could be. They volunteer a lot of their hours, and they're just generally good people. They're just fun to be around. So for all that, we're, as a district commander, I'm very grateful to have them. I have one of those supervisors here that's going to say a little quick message about why they're here and about this award. So
Thank you, Captain.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Thank you for having us tonight, and we appreciate your recognition. A little bit about our volunteer program really quickly. I know your time is precious. We are 1,500 strong, and last year we were able to donate $8.6 million in value-added services to the community, Wellington included in that. And both of our volunteer members today are people who live in Wellington, serve in Wellington, and benefit Wellington. So we're very proud to honor them today. And I'm sure that you're not very familiar with them, so I'd like to tell you just a couple things about them. For starters, Captain Chet McCarthy has been with our program for quite some time. In 2017, he became a captain, and he started with us in 2012. In addition to that, he was the Vert Captain of the Year, and he's a Wellington Buena Vida member as a community member. So he's there in his own community serving all the time. Sergeant Kenneth Finkelman, he is somebody who has received the Volunteer Award for Excellence through our Department of Corrections, and he started with us in 2014. He too is a member of the village communities, and he handles all of our speed trailers, our radar enforcement. He helps us slow people down and keep people safe. And without a doubt, these two members work very, very hard at keeping our communities safe and dedicate themselves to making sure that Wellington is a better place along with the rest of the county. So thank you for recognizing them today.
Thank you. It's an amazing contribution when you hear the number, $8.5 million of value added. And they're not just driving around being seen. They're working car accidents and helping direct traffic, and just hearing about it and knowing that they're just doing it just to give back to the community is amazing.
It's
So,
amazing that it's all of their own accord and of their own time. They don't get paid a cent for it. And we have volunteers in our mounted unit, on our bike units. We have a marine unit that's got 5 boats that saves lives. every
That
single
looked like
day.
a tough job. When they showed that
It's a lot
video of
harder.
the guys on the boat, I thought,
And
yeah,
most of
that's a
them-
tough job.
Amazingly, most of them are Coast Guard certified. They're captains, they're leaders, they're people who give. And we have so many different programs where we give back to the community. Most importantly, these volunteers are all part of our major initiative. See something, say something. They are part of that tip of the spear that brings this information to the sheriff's office so we can prevent crime.
Very
And for
well.
that, we owe them our thanks.
Thank you. Do we have a proclamation to give them, Rachel?
We have two,
A paper
we have
one?
certificates for
Okay.
Sergeant Finkelman and Captain
So if you two could come up, and we're going to do a picture with the council down here and the mayor's proclamations, but then I want everyone to come up for another picture because we don't often get to honor you, so.
Thank you, madam. After you that way.
Yeah, they put you in front of that stuff.
Okay.
You got a telephone book? Good to see you. And next to these two giants.
Yeah, I see that we're moving a little,
You can, if you do this, you can kind of see it. Kind of see it. There you go.
I don't have to have it in my picture. Now you're official. There we go, there we go.
No, I know you can.
Really?
Yeah. Are you guys joining us? Come in?
We'll be bookends.
Yeah.
We'll be the bookends. White shirts in the middle, white shirts in the middle.
Come in, ladies. Let's get in the middle, get close, get comfortable.
See, we can kneel down, but then we won't be able to.
Yeah, no, don't get it. It hurts me just to hear that. Oh, it hurts to hear that. I wouldn't.
I'm gonna move this chair out of the way.
Squeeze in, turn sideways.
Angle your body sideways. Right, perfect. Come on back a little bit.
Tall. You want to get up?
One more.
Everyone can sit back down. The council has some things they want to say. I don't want to miss out on that. They'll never let me.
So how long is the recovery? Till probably, oh my God. Good seeing you. Good to see you. Let's hope this, rapid. Oh, yeah.
Okay, and for comment, Mr. Vice Mayor, is there anything you'd like to say?
Well, obviously, I want to thank you all for all the work you do. I mean, you're doing real work and you're volunteering, and it really, you make our community a safer place. And the fact that so many of you came here tonight, not just the two honorees, talks about the camaraderie you all have together. And we really appreciate all that you do for our village and wherever you serve. And so thank you very much.
Councilman McGovern?
I too want to just say thank you all for being, as they said, our eyes and ears and the tip of the spear. It is exceptional, and it's something that we take so seriously here in Wellington. It's a great honor that the first Citizens on Patrol unit was here in Wellington. It's Citizens on Patrol Unit 1. It's something that you all give so much time to. So we are thankful for your service, and we're thankful to your families for the fact that they allow you to give that service. Let me say specifically, I have had the great privilege of knowing Captain Chet McCarthy and the McCarthys for several years now, and the same is true with Sergeant Finkelman. And I just want to say that they are spectacular assets to your team and highly valued members here in the village. We were able to recognize with our Hometown Hero Award last year, Captain McCarthy, and I hope that we'll continue to recognize all of you for your service and dedication to keeping us safe. So thank you so much.
Right, and I'll just echo the same sentiments. Thank you so much. It makes our community a better place having all of you volunteering. And I do believe I heard a shout out to see if there were any other people that would like to join and that you were looking for more volunteers. So we'll just put that out there, that they are always looking for more volunteers. And I know there's a quote about volunteers. I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it says they're not paid because they're worthless, but because they're priceless. I think it goes something like that. And you guys are priceless. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. And
Thank you all.
thank you for heading it all up and being here with us tonight and explaining it in a much broader way to the community. So thanks. You don't have to stay. I know you guys got stuff to do, but you're welcome to. It's an open meeting, but I know everybody wants to go. So, okay, that brings us to our consent agenda, but we have a couple of comments on the consent agenda.
We have
Mr.
comments.
Vice Mayor?
Yes. We have two comment cards on consent, comments on two items.
Yes, we have two comment cards on the consent. They're
Bruce, that
both
would
from
be
Bruce
you.
Tuman.
Okay. And we only have one podium tonight, so. Wait, do we have both podiums back, Paul? Mr. Schofield, do we have both podiums back in use now? We don't have our sign language tonight?
No, we have the closed captioning is working.
Closed captioning is
Use two
working
podiums,
very
good.
well. So we're ADA compliant, even without our sign language in the back. So very good. Great work. So you want to read the card?
Bruce Tooman.
Item number G.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Bruce Tooman. I reside at 752 Lake Wellington Drive in the village of Wellington. Town Center Boardwalk Project in the village of Wellington, design cost of $46,000. Well, at least it's not $24 million. But how much have we spent on designs for our town center? Now, looking at the scope of work, it includes the basic design components, except one, public input. We are using our taxes, so why not include public input comment after, quote, the completion final schematic design to incorporate construction drawings, end quote. That would be a good time to get the public to look at the schematics to see if we want this type of arrangement. Of course, that's only if you all really want our opinion. Thank you.
And you had another
Don't go,
I
you
comment?
have
guess
one more
don't go
card.
away because our other comment is from
We-
Bruce Tooman
we
on item
take,
6J.
We take comments on the consent agenda, so that's what we're doing here right now, so.
And item J of the consent agenda. Again, my name is Bruce Tooman. I reside at 752 Lake Wellington Drive in the village of Wellington. As a city commissioner, I was always appreciated of the staff when they find state and federal grants for us, thus saving local taxpayers money. Although keep in mind, the state and federal government gets taxes from us, so we're just getting it back that way. The 2019 Florida Boating Improvement Program that the state has provides grants for several water-related issues like docks, like adequate aquatic plant control, and initiative to promote boating. We need docks. That'd be a good place to use this money, and continue our aquatic plant control. And as for initiatives, what about a snakehead fishing contest to promote boating on a lake, or maybe funding our boat parade? Finally, I noticed the application deadline date was April 1st, 2019, last month. But I talked to the state, and they said Wellington did make the deadline date. But that was before this council's decision. Thank you.
Mr. Schofield, would you address that? Because it sounds a little accusatory, so if you don't mind addressing that issue, of if we have voted on this boardwalk previously.
One of the things that happened, we have been typically applying for the boating grants, had not required council resolutions, they were just applications. One of the things that came up in this was they wanted a resolution, and that's why we're here getting the resolution. The grant is in, and we have no guarantee that we're going to get it, but this is a request from them to get a resolution, which is a new requirement.
And we have previously voted, I recall the vice mayor voted in negative on this project. We had
Yes.
previously voted to move ahead with this portion of it. Right, okay. Have we met every
And
legal
we've,
requirement, Ms. Cohen?
As far as I know, as long as we're providing the resolution, there is no reason why staff could not have applied for the grant. There's nothing that guarantees that we're going to get it, and it's certainly subject to your approval.
Okay, very well. All right, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, hearing none, motion passes unanimously. And that brings us to,
Public comments, and you
Forum.
have a number of cards all on Rustic Ranch Roads.
okay,
We do, and I'll call you. You guys can stage at two podiums. The first person to come down is Andrea Columbine. You come down to this podium up here. And then Gus Whitelaw, I guess, is on deck, and you can come to the next podium.
and what we're going to ask you to do is come up to the podium, one or the other, they're both functional, and say your name and address if you don't mind, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the council. So,
Hello.
and don't be nervous, that's the other rule, no nervous, it's
Oh,
okay.
Okay. I'm Andrea Colombino. Property is 16600 Hollow Tree Lane, Wellington. Stop litigating, please start listening. Live up to the promises made to rustic ranches at a high standard. In March 9th, 2004, Rustic Ranches residents voted in favor of annexation into Wellington, just as you begged us to do, in exchange for our roads being maintained. You promised the roads would become part of the Wellington street maintenance system. It's all in writing. From January to March 2004, in meeting after meeting, mailing after mailing, you aggressively pursued the residents of Rustic Ranches to annex in, and we did. Volume 1, Questions and Answers. Questions and Concerns. Will Public Works grade the unpaved roads in Rustic Ranches? And if so, how often? Weekly, monthly? The answer: the village has set relatively high standards for all annual road maintenance. Once annexed, your roads would be included in the village street maintenance system. In addition to annual maintenance programs, roads similar to those in Rustic Ranches are typically graded or dragged once or twice a week, depending on climate conditions and usage of the roads. Volume 3, Questions and Answers. Will the village pave the roads? Will the village pave Flying Cow Road? The answer: the village does not have any current plans to pave the roads. They will be graded at a level of service once or twice a week, depending on the weather, which is consistent with the other unpaved roads in the village. The proposed annexation mailer. Annexation to Wellington, so much value in so many ways. You'll be surprised how many things remain unchanged. You'll be pleased how many things get better. Again, stated in your mailings and flyers, roads as part of roads as part of the village, your roads will become part of the village street maintenance systems. We've set high standards for the annual maintenance. Roads similar to yours are typically graded or dragged once or twice a week, depending on the weather and usage. And 2 years later, the Village Resolution 2006-02, the residents would like to keep their internal roads unpaved. However, this will require regular maintenance, which the village has agreed to perform. As a resident since 2002, we annexed in, and just my personal property taxes rose from roughly $4,000 to $9,000 the first year, which is a scary thing for a small business owner. But I also knew that the quality we would receive from Wellington would, or at least should be, uncomparable. Please return to doing your job. Thank you.
Yes.
Next, we have Gus Whitelaw, followed by Philip Brown.
Stop litigating.
You could say your name and address for the record if you don't mind.
I don't mind. Gus Whitelaw, 16555 Hollow Tree Lane.
Thank you.
Sorry. Stop litigating, start listening, learn the facts, and please continue maintaining our roads. Rustic Ranches residents and landowners are here tonight to make clear that Wellington obligated itself to the responsibility of maintaining Rustic Ranches roads in a contract it made in 2004. Before that, in 2003, Wellington was desperate to meet the government's new deadline to stop draining dangerous levels of phosphates directly into the Strazula Tract and the Everglades via the Loxahatchee National Wildlife Refuge. Wellington needed land next to Rustic Ranches to redirect drainage from the south to the north and to save millions of dollars. The annexation of Rustic Ranches into Wellington provided a contiguous stepping stone to securing land next to Rustic Ranches, land critical for phosphate cleansing and drainage, while also laying a way to go after lands north of Southern, even though those attempts later failed. This was the main reason why Wellington began an aggressive pursuit to convince Rustic Ranches residents of the many benefits they would get, inclusive of having their roads become part of the village street maintenance system. If only they would vote yes on March 9th, 2004 to annex into Wellington and start paying Wellington taxes. According to the Palm Beach Post, May 11, 2019, Wellington officials admit an aggressive campaign was used to convince residents to become part of the village. That's the village's own words. After a number of informational meetings, Wellington invited residents to attend in January and February of 2004, and then 3 volumes of brochures and a final mailer documenting promised benefits of being part of Wellington. On March the 9th, 2004, a majority of residents voted yes to annexation. The contract between Wellington and its newest residents was consummated, with both sides getting what they wanted. Within 3 weeks, Wellington secured the more than 8,000 acres it desperately needed
while Rustic Ranches received a high standard of road maintenance, having become part of the street maintenance system. After annexation in 2004, Wellington started to maintain the roads with funding it received from the county and maintained Rustic Ranches continuously for nearly 14 years with funding that cost the village nothing and the residents nothing. It was funded. The roads were funded. It cost us nothing. It cost you nothing. And then the village stopped, writing April of 2018 that it would no longer maintain our roads. They would give up the gas tax funding, and it would not discuss the matter, slamming the door shut on taxpayers, voters, and residents who came with you in 2004. Please open that door. Stop litigating. Start listening. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Philip Brown. I live at 16501 Deer Path Lane. Stop litigating. Learn the facts. Maintain our roads. Your promises and public policy demand it. The village claims it needs an agreement in place to maintain Rustic Ranches roads, yet it maintained our roads for the entire fiscal year 2018 without any agreement in place. The village claims that it is not that easy to just start maintaining Rustic Ranches roads again, yet they maintain the portion of Flying Cow Road that goes over Rustic Ranches property was not yet conveyed to the village in 2006, when the portion north of Rustic Ranches was. Plus, Wellington is maintaining a number of other dirt roads throughout Wellington, where parcels include the roadways, such as stretches of 50th Street South, 140th Avenue South, 55th Street, and more. Such public policy has been established. Wellington is able to maintain dirt roads and other roadways even when parcel boundaries include all or a portion of the road. We agreed to annex into Wellington in 2004, giving you Wellington a continuous path to land you desperately needed to critical drainage of phosphates away from the Everglades. You should thank us for saving you millions of dollars. Your claims that Pine Tree is responsible for the roads are false. There's one and only one governing document for Pine Tree, the charter codified in 2009. Nowhere does it assign the Pine Tree responsibility or the duty to maintain roads within the 4,000-acre district. You don't need a lawyer to understand the charter for Pine Tree, but I guess you need a lawyer to twist the meaning in order to convince the council to take legal action against another government entity, and in the process punish its residents, its own residents. Stop litigating, start listening, protect your residents, follow public policy, keep your promises, maintain our roads.
Next card is from Ralph Potente, followed by Cecilia Stewart.
Either one. Thank you.
Who's first, me? Ralph Potente, I'm from New York, but I own property on Norris Road. Ladies and gentlemen, you're being hoodwinked. Surely you realize that the residents of Rustic Ranches have standing to intervene in any action that you take against Pine Tree. You're being hoodwinked into believing that the interlocal agreement between you and Pine Tree is the driving document responsible for the maintenance of the roads in Rustic Ranches. It isn't. Your staff told you that the residents wanted to terminate the agreement. They didn't. They couldn't. Landowners and residents are not interchangeable. It's a different voting block. Doesn't make any sense. Any concern about policy creating a precedent in maintaining roads in the village is a red herring. You've already done it for over 12 years. Your duty, with Rustic Ranches Roads is a result of a 2004 implied contract with a quid pro quo, period. Period. That's it. That's not the situation anywhere else in the village. You're being misled. You already have an implied public policy to maintain privately owned roads in the village, including unpaved ones. So again, you're being bamboozled by your own staff who cherry-pick their words in order to trick you. And then when they get caught, they say, oh, you must have misunderstood. Look at the video, that's what it says on it. The residents deserve better. You don't even respond to our outreach. Instead, you huddle with your staff behind closed doors and scheme against the residents using their tax dollars to do so. It's disgraceful. Trampling residents' right to redress their grievances is a violation of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. It's a right of redress, not just a right of grievance. By filing your wrongful writ of mandamus,
Can you please address the chair? Okay,
sorry.
it's okay.
By filing your wrongful writ of mandamus against Pine Tree, in your own words, you are prolonging the danger to the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of Rustic Ranches and the public at large. To that, we all agree. You are now seeking a writ of mandamus against a non-party while filing your action containing numerous frauds on the court. Wellington, as a landowner in Section 24, does not have equitable standing. It's not a taxpayer, so it can't have equitable standing. But I'm sure you guys all knew that already. Wellington is claiming that Pine Tree has a ministerial duty per the district's water control plan, yet precise reading of that plan clearly indicates that no such duty exists. In fact, it's the village that has the duty. I have a recommendation. You rescinded the interlocal agreement based on fraudulent information, falsified information. Rescind it. You canceled it, now rescind the cancellation. And put everything back the way it was, and we're all good to go.
Your time is up. Thank you.
I'm Cecilia Stewart. I'm a property owner in Rustic Ranches, 16888 and 16900 Hollow Tree Lane. Stop litigating, please start listening, learn the facts, and keep your promises. We are outraged at the dubious stories the village staff has used to trick the village council into its work. Perhaps the most egregious act is the fabricated claim that village manager Schofield made to the council, captured on video, October 2016, claiming that Rustic Ranches residents, along with the Pine Tree Board of Supervisors, wanted to terminate the agreement for services, including road maintenance. Absolutely untrue. Despite the blatantly false claims, the mayor and council voted to terminate the agreement, and that is what ultimately brings us here today. With the village abdicating their responsibility and placing their residents in the precarious situation of having roads abandoned by Wellington becoming increasingly impassable. The truth became part of the public record, as documented in May 2017, the village council meeting when Mr. Schofield apologized and the village attorney Cohen agreed the October information had been wrong. That's the time the village should have woken up and reinstated a complete agreement inclusive of continuing to maintain the roads. Please stop litigating, and please listen. The village promises to maintain Rustic Ranches roads predate and were not based on anything to do with Pine Tree, inclusive of Pine Tree becoming dependent. Becoming dependent was how Wellington planned to remove the Pine Tree Board of Supervisors so the village council could take full control of the taxing district. Yes, all along the village had a plan. A somewhat sneaky plan, a covert plan to take full control of Pine Tree, and with it the power to assess Pine Tree electors extra taxes. Wellington avoided open discussion of their plan to get control of Pine Tree because they planned not to have a vote from the electors. The paper trail proves this. Wellington pursued legislation to force the Pine Tree Board to step down so the village could take over without any vote. However, local government intervened. The county commissioners rejected Wellington's proposal. The county commissioners redrafted the bill to insist on giving the electors the opportunity to vote. Shockingly, Wellington's first open discussion of Pine Tree becoming a dependent district of Wellington was not until July 2015, more than a year after Wellington begged Rustic Ranches to annex into it in exchange for maintaining its roads. Learn the facts, and please keep your promises. Thank you.
We have two more cards. We have Houston Meggs, followed by Bruce Tuman.
I'm going to ask if you don't mind, we understand that you're standing in agreement, but it's a little disruptive. So if you don't mind, I appreciate it.
Good evening. Houston Meggs, 16433 Deer Path Lane, Wellington. Houston Meggs, 16433 Deer Path Lane, Wellington. We are here tonight because the village of Wellington has chosen to throw one of its neighborhoods under the bus, not seek community discussion and resolve an issue. In March of 2004, the residents of Rustic Ranches accepted the overtures of Wellington to become part of Wellington through annexation, predicated on promises made, one of which was the maintenance of the roads. That promise was not made to Pine Tree. That promise was made to the residents of the community of Rustic Ranches. That promise was made in perpetuity. The actions you are considering today are an assault against the people you sought to be part of your community and the people you sought to represent and serve. Instead of wasting time and resources of the village and the property owners of Rustic Ranches, why not discuss the community, its issues, and resolve them? Has any such meeting been proposed or arranged? We've been waiting for a while. Your relationship with Rustic Ranches residents, your relationship is with Rustic Ranches residents, not Pine Tree. Your obligation is with the people you represent. Degrading their roads you are responsible for through promises made in 2004 and the subsequent 12 years you maintain them is wrong and should be reversed tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Tuman. I reside at 752 Lake Wellington Drive in the village of Wellington. I emailed our public works director about a pothole on Forest Club Road. He promptly replied stating that the village nor Acme owns this section of the road. An adjacent homeowners association, according to property appraiser, owns this section of the road that two other complexes must drive on to get to a public road. Are we trespassing? After the pothole was repaired, I called the director to thank him and found out that there are other roads with similar ownership issues. Unfortunately, this HOA was dissolved back in 1989, according to State Division of Corporations, and filed with the Palm Beach Clerk of the Court in 2002. The HOA documents require access to be disposed of either by the board or the courts, specifically giving governments land options for the public good. A section of a road that more than 400 cars must drive on to get to a public road is in the public good. Now, did the association fail to properly dispose of their roads? Why didn't the courts dispose of the roads? Why didn't the state inform the county of the dissolution of the corporation? Why didn't the clerk of the court notify the property appraiser about the ownership of the roads? Why didn't the village or Acme petition for the road? And why is our public works repairing private property? Is there a policy of repairing private roads? And why are some of our residents paying more to maintain our roads than others? Now, since this property is not currently owned by anyone, access the courts to dispose of this property to the village or Acme should not cost a lot of money. Of course, the amount our lawyers make nowadays, maybe that's why it's so high. But before we spend money, $7 million on our broadwalk, maybe we should be maintaining our roads. Thank you.
There are no further comment cards.
Ms. Cohen, is this something we cannot discuss because of the writ of mandamus that's
There's
on our
no
agenda?
pending litigation right now, so you're free to discuss this in public.
Okay, so the record of this, do we know if we're maintaining other dirt roads
We are.
that we do not have any?
Well, let me go back to a couple of things. There are some places where the roads have been maintained by government long before Wellington was incorporated, specifically in the Equestrian Preserve. A lot of those roads were originally easements. They're part of canals based on the statute that says if you maintain them without an agreement, they come into the public domain. On the Castanella Foresta stuff, those shouldn't be maintained by Public Works. If it was, I will find out why. But let's go back to rustic ranches for just a moment. And what kind of gets lost in all of this is I empathize with residents. They are caught between two governments. But the thing here is that Pine Tree Water Control District is a government. They were constituted by an act of the legislature signed by the government, and they have very specific powers and authorities. And one of the things in that original legislation was the ability to operate and maintain roads. Now, Rustic Ranches is a subdivision that was approved by Palm Beach County in the 70s under a process called the Affidavit of Exemption. And in those Affidavit of Exemptions, what the developer did, in this case I think it was Tom Waldron, said, we don't want to comply with county subdivision regulations, but what we're going to do is we're going to have lots that are a minimum of 5 acres, or they have to be just a touch over 5 acres, so most of them end up being 5.01 acres. Now, in order to get that affidavit of exemption, you have to do a couple of things. You have to specify who's responsible for drainage and who's responsible for maintaining the roads, and in this case, the specification was Pine Tree Water Control District. That affidavit of exemption further says there is no recourse to the county for that. Now, and again, this was a county approval. So from the mid-70s up until 2004, Pine Tree did in fact maintain the roads. And yes, there was an effort to get Rustic Ranches into the village. Now, we do not pump any water from Wellington into that stormwater treatment area. We do pump water into Section 24. As a part of
STA, we don't pump into STA 1.
STA
We
1
do
east.
pump into the Wellington Environmental Preserve.
Correct, and that's 300 and change acres. So in 2004, on annexation, we then entered into an agreement with Pine Tree Water Control District where we would provide government services, and that was with the clear understanding that Pine Tree, and it was Pine Tree, not the residents, they are correct about that, that Wellington would provide governmental services, some of which they paid us directly for, some of which were paid for because we were able to put roads on the gas, we were able to collect gas tax for them. But that agreement contained a provision, but either party could opt out of it in 270 days. We went along at the point where Pine Tree
Mr. Scopel,
residents.
can I just interrupt for 1 second? When you say government services, that consists of more than just the roads.
It consisted of the drainage, the roads, and
Administrative services
some of
as
the
well.
administrative services that the district provided. So we entered into the agreement, and in 2006, when we were going through the process of actually making Pine Tree dependent, the residents of Pine Tree, not Pine Tree, but the residents voted not to do that. So that agreement should technically have been over in 2006 when that didn't happen. The residents are absolutely correct. There were a variety of documents that talked about how Wellington maintains roads and that we could come in and do that. But they will not find in any of that is that we ever said that it would be done at no expense to the residents who are getting that. It's like when you go into our equestrian preserve where we have shell rock roads that are actually owned by the village. The residents down there are also part of the Acme Improvement District, which is a dependent drainage district, and they pay a $230 a year per acre assessment that in part goes towards those things. We went down a path for a long time where we and the South Florida Water Management District, who owns most of the land inside of the Pine Tree Water Control District, participated. And the residents are correct. There was a point at a council meeting when I said the residents knew, and they didn't. Who knew was the Pine Tree's attorney and some of the board members. And there was a small group of residents, a very small, that wanted more control over the district. And at that time, the South Florida Water Management District had a member on the board. I think it was Joel Arrieta was the board. And through a series of things, the district decided they wanted off the board and they were going to stop paying assessments. They get no benefit from Pine Tree, none. So they walked away. And then, you know, as the board changed and it was fully in control of the residents, the residents, there was a number of votes, and I don't know who voted for them or not. I know that the proxies were done. We've asked for the votes, and I don't think I've actually seen them yet. But as things got to the point where we couldn't reach agreement with them, we notified the board. We gave them the 270 days notice. We also, at the end of that 270 days, it was sort of midpoint and we were still collecting gas tax. So we agreed to maintain the roads until the end of September. And I think it was 2018, it might have been until 2018. We have offered the Pine Tree Water Control District the ability to enter into a contract with us to maintain these. And if they do, we'll be able to collect gas taxes again. We haven't heard a response to that. The roads are getting worse. They are not in a condition that, as of today, I would tell you is dangerous. But what I will tell you is that I think come July or August in the rainy season, we're going to have that, which is why we need to solve the issue, who's responsible. I think that if the Pine Tree Water Control District asks us today to enter into an agreement, and we have made that offer, then I think it is something that we can as a village do. But what's important to remember about the roads in Rustic Ranches is they don't belong to us, and Pine Tree is correct, they don't belong to Pine Tree either. Each property owner owns to the middle of the street. Those roads are actually owned by the adjacent property owner. The people who have the easement to maintain them, the people who have it in their affidavit of exemption is Pine Tree. Pine Tree can, through agreement, we can enter an agreement with Pine Tree where we can maintain those roads. The other thing that can happen is that if the residents want to dedicate those roads to the public, we can go through that process. But there is no process that where we have set up to take private roads. And one of the things to remember is that almost half the roads in the village are in private communities. As far as I know, there's only, you know, I live in a gated community and I know most of council does. The only person here on the council who lives on a public street is the mayor. But for those of us who live in private gated communities, government doesn't maintain our streets, our homeowners associations.
Even private ungated communities. There are
Private
several
ungated
in Wellington that aren't gated, but
That's right.
yet they're private.
Yeah, Emerald Forest is one of those private ungated communities, and they pay for their own road maintenance. So yes, I do think this has to be resolved. I think we have to do it very quickly. I thought the resolution of this was going to happen when Pine Tree had filed suit against us. We had gone in for the first hearing, and Mrs. Cohen can go through the details of that. Things were moving slowly. We were going to ask to have information. Information wasn't being provided. We weren't getting things. So we were looking to compel. After the first hearing was lost, then they dropped the lawsuit, and we need to resolve this issue, and we need to do it for.
So Pine Tree filed a lawsuit against
Well,
the
Ms.
village.
Cohen, before we get to that, can I just ask a question? Have we filed any litigation at this point in time against Pine Tree?
No.
Okay.
So Pine Tree filed a lawsuit against the village for a declaratory action to ask the court who was responsible for maintaining the roadways. It was Wellington's position that Pine Tree is the responsible party, and it was Pine Tree's position that Wellington is the responsible party. They asked the court for a temporary injunction. We went to the hearing, and at the hearing, the court took evidence and listened to the argument of the attorneys. Pine Tree was represented at the hearing by one attorney and another attorney who was had not made an appearance but was sitting second chair. And after the hearing and considering the evidence, the court denied the injunction, finding that it was not likely that Pine Tree was going to succeed on the merits of the complaint. And so we also moved to stay the action because Pine Tree had not complied with the pre-suit negotiation provisions of Chapter 164. And at the hearing, the attorney for Pine Tree represented that there were no disputed facts and indicated that he would go forward and get a resolution from the board of Pine Tree, essentially doing what we did tonight, which is dispensing with that pre-suit negotiation process, because the facts were so clear and agreed upon that the court could rule as a matter of law. I prepared a stipulation of the agreed upon facts. I sent it to the attorney. I never received a response. Then another attorney, the one who sat second chair and had not entered an appearance, began assuming the role in the litigation. I sent some discovery and received some responses that were not as complete as I felt they should have been, and I was preparing to file a motion to compel. And without any discussion whatsoever with me, the attorney for Pine Tree dropped the lawsuit. No explanation, no discussion, and so at that point, that issue became moot. That, you know, that they were not seeking a determination from the court anymore as to who, between the village and Pine Tree, was responsible for maintenance of the roadways.
And at the conclusion of that matter, are you aware of any shade session minutes or transcripts for the Pine Tree Board relative to a decision to dismiss that lawsuit or any of those kinds of things?
To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any public meeting or any notice of a shade session by the board of Pine Tree to discuss whether to dismiss the lawsuit. It appeared to me that it was kind of a unilateral decision by one board member, and the attorney dismissed it.
And the other question is, I think that this council has attempted to find a way to solve this problem without going to this point, but we asked the Pine Tree Board to make some kind of proposal.
I sent a letter, essentially a demand letter to Pine Tree with a copy of the draft of the complaint that I intended to file, and basically alleged that it was their responsibility to maintain the roadways. I have not heard anything from their attorney.
Mr. Schofield, we have expressed that we are willing to maintain the roadways, that they have the money in their account to maintain the roadways. Have they presented that to their residents?
I am not aware that they have done that. When we turned Pine Tree over, when we turned the administration of Pine Tree over to the current board and their current management company, there was about $180,000 in their account. Based on the last public meeting where they announced what funds they had available, that number is up around $300,000. They have the money to do it. I'm prepared to recommend to you that if we can enter into an agreement with them, that we maintain the roads. But what we need,
Them being Pine Tree.
them being Pine Tree. Now, the residents, they're caught here. They're caught between two governments who are saying, this is not my responsibility. We thought we had the way to resolve this. We had made the offer to Pine Tree Board, not Rustic residents, but the Pine Tree Board. We made the offer to enter into just an agreement for the roadway maintenance before the termination point of the interlocal. If they come back with that today, I'm prepared to recommend to you that we do that.
But one issue for discussion is how is that to be paid for?
What's the mechanism?
Exactly, what's the
And the
mechanism?
question is whether without any ownership or any subjective rights of ours, can we even use gas tax? And that was a discussion.
I believe, I've done some research on that. I believe that we could reflect them on our gas tax map. It certainly is too late for this current year, but, and so there would have to be a discussion as to who pays for that maintenance. Well, number one, if we are to reflect them on the gas tax map, and who would pay for the maintenance of those roadways during that interim period if you decided to go ahead and put the roads back on the gas tax map.
And here's the rub, I think, that is missing from the conversation from the resident standpoint is when gas tax money is collected and used throughout the village, it's used where needed. It's not dedicated to one street. You don't collect the gas tax and use it on that street. The gas tax is for all roads.
Yes.
So,
But it is based on lane miles that are calculated.
That's how
Yeah.
we get the money.
Yeah.
But I think that my estimation of how we got into the situation was Pine Tree was unsatisfied with the level of service that they were getting. They felt like they had a certain amount of money, certain amount of rock that they were supposed to have in a Excuse me, I did not interrupt any of you. I did not interrupt any of you, please. They were telling us, the leadership of Pine Tree, whether or not the Rustic Ranches residents were those who were getting their leadership in order or not, they were saying that we weren't doing it right. There were all kinds of problems. There were investigations about how much rock was spent where. What part am I missing, Mr. Schofield?
You're not.
So,
And were they not also unhappy with our administrative services? There was a whole series of things.
Right, and repeatedly expressed at meetings, and there was a lot of dissatisfaction with all of the services under the interlocal agreement that were being provided.
and it wasn't just the roads. So we would like to solve this problem. We certainly don't want to have a room full of angry residents, and you are our residents, and we understand that. But the situation that we're up against is the best way to move forward. Our attorney and our staff is saying, let's get this to the court.
Right, well, the easiest way would be for,
Because my question was going to be, what is the non-litigation solution to the problem? And I understand your comments, you said there are two. There can be a new interlocal agreement, or they can create a new unit of development where they dedicate the roads, and then we would take care of it. Those are the two ways to resolve it without litigation, or is there any, or are those correct?
those are fundamentally the two, and the easiest one is just to enter into an agreement for just the roads, and that's a very simple thing to do.
If Pine Tree would agree to it.
If Pine Tree agrees to that.
Which has been the problem
Otherwise,
before.
it then requires all the residents to get together and do this. And I think that, you know, the residents in Rustic Ranches, for the most part, are probably willing to enter into that agreement, but what would happen is it would require all of them.
Right.
It
Well,
would
but
require
the
100% agreement.
The issue is, the agreement would have to be with Pine Tree. You know, while Rustic Ranches residents have expressed their opinions, we're not, Rustic Ranches is not a governmental entity. We're dealing with Pine Tree. So we've heard nothing from the Pine Tree Board about this issue.
Who's on the Pine Tree Board right now? Is anyone on the Pine Tree Board
It's
here?
Lee Wright,
Okay.
And who
and
else?
I don't know the other gentleman's name.
There's 3 members.
The only two that I know are Mr. Wright and Mr. Nagao.
So, you know,
This is an actual governmental agency.
it's a governmental
not-
entity.
It's not some kind of,
No, and-
mystery.
It's no different than Northern Improvement or any other independent
Or the
special
Lake Worth
district.
Drainage District or Acme or any
Ex-
of those districts.
Right, well, Acme is a
Acme's
dependent
dependent.
district, but yes, it has all the powers that are set forth in its enabling
Sure,
legislation.
but it has exactly the same powers that we have when we sit as the Acme Board. I mean,
And requirements. It has
correct.
definite requirements
It
for what's
does.
required, and it's required to act in a certain way. And that's where we're getting into this disagreement, is they're not acting in a way that is in accordance with the government rules. And it's very difficult. So we're in between a rock and a hard place here, and we're just trying to proceed. But we want to solve the problem. It's our goal to solve the problem. I think that's always been our goal. And Ms. Cohen, you think this is the fastest way to get to a solution?
Well, I think this is an appropriate way. I think that either we're going to enter into an agreement with them if the Pine Tree Board will communicate with us, or absent that, I don't believe I don't believe there is any you know, any disagreement. Well, there is a disagreement, but I don't believe that the Pine Tree, or that the Rustic Ranches roads are the maintenance responsibility of the village legally, okay? And so in order to force Pine Tree to take care of the roadways, this would be the appropriate mechanism to do that. So, you know, I'll take direction from council. If you want us not to file the lawsuit and you want to try to negotiate an agreement with Pine Tree, that's perfectly fine. If you direct me to file the lawsuit, I'll file the lawsuit.
Well, as our discussion yesterday, is we felt like this was the swiftest way to come to an agreement. It's not a matter of us wanting to be argumentative or file a lawsuit. We feel like this is the swiftest way to find a solution.
Because we've been waiting for Pine Tree to engage with us, and they refuse to do so. And we can't let the roads continue to go unmaintained, and we can't do them without an agreement. So we can have an agreement with Pine Tree to get this done, or we can proceed with the lawsuit and have a court decide who's supposed to maintain the roads. We
Well-
don't have the luxury of just waiting for this to happen.
And it's our position that there is no, that it is perfectly clear who's to maintain the roads. And so therefore, we would be asking the court to require Pine Tree to maintain the roadways and then to issue an injunction going forward that they continue to maintain them.
The one thing I want council to remember in all of this, though, I believe that we need to go forward with the writ of mandamus. But the fact that we do that does not preclude us from negotiating with Pine Tree to settle this. And the easiest thing to do would be to have Pine Tree sit down with us and say, look, this is in the best interest of both of our residents. Let's work out an agreement. And you already know that what I'm prepared to recommend to you.
Well, you're prepared to recommend an agreement that says that we maintain the roads and that they pay us to do so.
Right, and the basic part of that agreement would be the cost of maintaining the roads is what the cost is. Pine Tree enters into an agreement, and to the extent that we can collect gas tax, we'll offset those costs.
And that would be next year.
That would be next year,
Right.
and that creates a larger discussion, as the mayor's already pointed out, as to gas tax being allocated to particular roads versus all the roads. There's a whole series of issues there.
Yeah. But this is the first step, and we need to take it, and we have never been unwilling to discuss road maintenance.
Ms. Cohen, sometimes it's hard for me to be a council person, take off my lawyer hat and just,
Really?
yeah. I know it's hard, but, so my
That's a little
question,
interrogating.
my question to you as our lawyer is there a mechanism to expedite the writ of mandamus, to move it forward as rapidly as possible
Well,
under the rules, under the civil rules?
I don't see any way to expedite the writ of mandamus, but I do see a way to expedite the injunction, which is a temporary
Sorry.
injunction and a permanent, I'd file a motion for a temporary injunction and try to get an expedited hearing before the court. The writ of mandamus is an appropriate mechanism to address an immediate issue, and an injunction is appropriate where the court has to exercise jurisdiction over a period of time to ensure compliance. So,
But what I want you to do is I want you to, for these residents, and I think that we're bringing this legal action, in my view, to assist the residents, in that I'm not sure the resident.
We don't take comment except during public comment, and that you've had your 3 minutes. I
I'm not
apologize. In order to maintain the order of the meeting, I'm going to ask you not to shout out from the audience, and it's not because I don't want to hear. We have heard, but it doesn't allow us to have an orderly meeting.
I think the residents are residents subject to two governmental entities, just like many Wellington residents are subject to the Village of Wellington and to ACME. The residents of Rustic Ranches are residents of Wellington, and they're residents of the Pine Tree Water Control District. I think that the interest of these residents is that their roads be maintained by the government entity that is responsible to do it. And I think the quickest way to get a final resolution, it's not even an answer to the question, it's a final resolution of the duty, and a court saying this entity does it and they do it now. That's what we're trying to do.
correct. In other words, we don't believe that there's any gray area as to who's responsible. We believe that Pine Tree is responsible, and so we're seeking an order from the court to require them to do what they ought to be doing.
And that also bears in mind that Pine Tree, is there anything that would prevent Pine Tree from contracting with someone not the village to
Correct.
maintain the roads starting tomorrow?
No, and in fact, Pine Tree did do maintenance on those roads from September of last year until mid-February of this year, and then they decided to stop it. And so they have the authority. They can do it with a private entity, they can do it with us, they can do it with whoever they choose.
And they've most recently exercised that
Well,
authority.
but I mean, from what I've read from the emails that have been sent, there appears to be someone telling the residents of Pine Tree and Rustic Ranches that they don't have the ability to the legal right to maintain them.
How could that?
I don't know, but I don't believe that's an accurate statement. And in the lawsuit that I've drafted, I'm alleging and asserting that they have both the ability to do it and the duty to do it.
Well, Ms. Cohen, as I have said for the entire time that I've been on this council, to you and to your office, if and when we enter into litigation, whether we are the initiating party or we are the party that is being litigated against, it is always my desire that litigation be moved forward as rapidly and to resolution as rapidly as is possible. And that is absolutely what, when this is filed, I will expect your office to take every step to move it to final hearing as fast as possible.
And we will.
All right. The consent agenda is before us. Is there a motion?
We've already approved the
You've already
consent
approved that.
agenda.
This was
we
public
already-
comment.
So we,
We've already had,
Okay,
this was
so-
public forum.
okay, so that
Okay.
was, we already approved that. Okay.
All right, that brings you next to public hearings, and the first item under public hearings is,
Before we do that, is there another comment card that's been turned in?
Nope, that was all of it.
Mr. Brody, did you turn in a comment card or? Okay.
Mr. Board,
I
I
need,
have a meeting tomorrow at 2:15.
but did you want to comment tonight?
You have to come to the
You
mic.
have to turn in a card. That's what I'm explaining. You have to turn in the card if you'd like to speak to us, and that's why. Okay. I just didn't want him to have to wait any longer than he's already waited, so. Okay, that's fine, as long as you turn it in. Thank you. Okay. If you could say your name and your address, and then you get at least 3 minutes. I think we could go a couple more.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Henry Brody. My nickname is Hank. Most people call me Hank. I live on 2078 Amesbury Circle in Wellington. Okay, the reason I want to talk to you is to explain
If you
something.
could please, we're having a meeting. If you could please, if you're going to leave, exit quietly. Thank you.
Is to explain an idea that I had, which I already presented. And I want to just make sure that the people who haven't heard me explain it understand what I'm asking you to do. The problem that I see occurred in the year 2006 when the Wellington seniors were promised a senior center. And the politics at the time...
Sir, you have to speak into the microphone.
Your hand is on.
Oh,
There you go.
okay. The politics at the time were such that that didn't happen. All of the things that they did to try to design something involved like 8,000 different things that they received, which said this is what we'd like to do. We promised it, and then it didn't happen. That's not important now that it didn't happen, because I want you to understand an idea that I presented, which would make that mute. The idea I had was that there be a search for land within and things that we own, and make them productive. If they're not being used to make money now, why not create a senior center and have businesses there, which you would own, Wellington would own it, or they would at least get revenue from it, and that would be used to support what seniors need, which is really not difficult to understand. We need a place of our own where we could have things like a theater for 1,000 people, and we would need a place to eat for about 600 people, and this would be supplied to the seniors and anyone else who would need it, as long as it didn't interfere with seniors. There would be like two things. One is seniors would get businesses because people would want to be there as a business. And if they were involved with seniors and would have to be shared with other people, that would be okay. As long as the seniors would get first crack at it, let's say in the morning, and that the other businesses would get, the afternoon. And we would share things. But we would like to have things like rooms that belong to seniors. People who wanted to do knitting would have a room to do knitting anytime they wanted to be there. Not 24/7, but during the day at least. And it would be their place. People who want to do gardening would have a room to do gardening. And it would be their place. People who want to do work with their hands, building things or painting or anything that seniors would like to do with other people would be made available to them. And this would be funded in part by the revenue that you would receive from this center. It would be like a revenue center that belongs to Wellington. Either that or you would get paid taxes. But part of that would go to seniors, and seniors, I'm not asking you to give it away for free. Just like there are places, and I did a search. I went to things like Abbey Del Rey. They have 3 centers there, North, South, and Harbortown. People pay for those services. They live in those houses. They provide it for them. I went to the place called Century Village, and people pay for those services as part of that stuff, but they pay a lot less because, like, for example, they get shows. People pay for those shows. They pay $10 or $12 for a show, which the next day is going to go to Kravitz, and they get it for $10. This is the kind of thing I would like you, to help us get. Now, you have to understand, I'm saying that we will pay for it. People who can't afford to pay, you will try to subsidize a little bit on people who really are poor and can't afford to pay. But most people in Wellington that I know can afford to pay a certain amount. I also know some people who can't really afford to eat. I know that. And that's another problem, and we could solve that
Mr.
another
Brody,
way.
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up if you don't
Okay,
mind.
I'm almost wrapped up.
Okay.
If you have any questions about what I'm trying to get you to understand, that we need and deserve a better facility, I'm going to be talking to my new friend over there tomorrow, okay? And what I don't have time to explain, on a one-on-one basis, I would like him to help me have you explain. And the only thing I'm asking you to do is to take a look at what happened in the year 2006, see what they promised, and see what happened. And I would like you to try to make that different. to recognize a mistake was made, and I would like to help you correct it. I am volunteering, as you know, to do anything I can to help. I've given you certain things you have asked for in another area. Remember, I promised you something? I gave it to you within 2 days.
Yes, I think we didn't necessarily agree on that. I don't think that you understood what I was asking for, but we will talk. Mr. Schofield will get with you on that, and we'll make some good conversation. So thank you for your comments.
Well, if you didn't get what you wanted on the other thing, okay?
We'll talk offline.
Will you
Thank
please call me?
Absolutely.
I want to help you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your patience with me. I don't know if I deserve it, but I'm grateful to have it.
Well, you sat through 2 meetings, 2 days in a row, so.
I don't know about yesterday.
Madam Mayor, we have one additional comment card on public
Okay.
forum. Carol Montgomery.
Okay.
The first thing I want to say is I want to make a special thanks to Mayor Gerwig and also to Councilman McGovern, because I think you have demonstrated your eagerness to listen and to understand some of the residential issues in the number of meetings that you have had with us until, for whatever reason, the phone calls and the emails ended in early April. There are so many things that were brought up this evening, so many things that Mr. Schofield commented on, that I'm not quite sure what the priorities are in terms of what I should comment on. I would say that over the last year, year and a half, we've accumulated a lot of discovery. And the discovery is in the form of letters and documents and ordinances and copies of minutes, which I think really would enlighten all of you. And I would suggest that we determine, is there an ombudsman? Is there some way that the residents could be represented and have a forum by which we could share the discovery? For instance, we have a letter that I believe is dated 1977 or 1978 from the Assistant County Attorney, who indicates that the affidavit of exemption, which Mr. Schofield references, is null and void. We've got a number of documents that bring up enough questions about some of the facts or assumptions that we've heard made here tonight that we'd like to think there would be value in doing so. In terms of outreach that the village staff may or may not have made to Pine Tree, that's not my purview, but I would say that my understanding is that April 2018 was the final letter that came from, I believe it was Ms. Cohen, to Pine Tree, indicating there was no interest in renewing an agreement and that there was no interest in coming to the table. If there is some information since that time, some official outreach other than a demand letter, that might be interesting to know if Ms. Cohen could make that recollection this evening. So again, the residents want only to provide the facts and useful information to the council so you can form the best decision possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, that brings us
To public hearings, and the first item under public hearings is ordinance number 2019-03, the nightclub ordinance. This is second and final reading. Ms. Colovi will read by title, and Mr. Basehart is here to present.
An ordinance of Wellington, Florida's Council amending Article 3 definitions, amending Table 6, Table 6.4-1, Use Regulation Schedule, Table 6.8-2, Plan Development District Use Regulation Schedule, and Table C, EOZD, Permitted, Conditional, and Prohibited Uses, amending Section 6.4.4, Supplementary Use Standards of the Land Development Regulations of the Village of Wellington, Florida, relating to uses to regulate the location of nightclub businesses and create operations standards and requirements, providing a conflicts clause, providing for codification, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date.
Mr. Basehart.
Good evening. As was mentioned, this is the second reading of this ordinance. The genesis of this ordinance, of course, is the council's continued desire to try to do whatever is possible to make the community safe. We were approached by the Sheriff's Department with a copy of an ordinance that the county had adopted, and it was requested that the village consider adopting it or our own ordinance of a similar nature to further the objective of keeping our nights safe in the village of Wellington. We determined that the best approach is to draft an ordinance that fits our community directly and also is compliant with our code. There were a lot of things in the county ordinance that we already had in our code, so to make it as simple and clean as possible, we wrote our own. And basically, what we have is 3 different elements in this code amendment. One is to amend the definitions, to create a definition for nightclub, and to differentiate them clearly from restaurants and other types of uses. Second thing is we had to add the standards and the criteria for managing the operation of these types of businesses, and that occurs in Article 6, the supplemental standards of the code. So, and you're familiar with what we wrote for those provisions. And finally, we amended the use tables to require that new businesses coming in that would be nightclub activities would require conditional use approval from council. But there's language also in the code that that recognizes any existing businesses that would fit the definitions and fit the criteria would be considered conforming uses. They wouldn't have to go through that process. And the primary emphasis on the new standards is to control patrons' attendance based on age, to require that when a business is operating functionally as a nightclub, that minors wouldn't be permitted on the premise, to keep underage drinking to eliminate underage drinking problems. And then there are security requirements as well to defend the business against and the community against some of the other kinds of things that happen at these types of businesses occasionally. The ordinance was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Board, who recommended unanimously that it be approved. Also, it was reviewed by the Equestrian Committee and the Public Safety Committee. Both of them also recommended approval unanimously. At first reading, there were 2 minor changes that were suggested, or not suggested, which were implemented by council, and we've put those in the final draft, and that's basically it. If you want to go through all the specific requirements, we can do that, but you're all familiar with them, and this has been heard before.
So I have one question that I'm not sure we touched on. It appears to me that wherever it occurs in the use tables, it's always a conditional use.
That's correct.
So what does that mean for the public's knowledge about what a conditional use is?
That means that if a new business wanted to come in and open in a commercial center in Wellington, that by definition,
these conditions we list are the conditions.
That's right.
So that is saying
that would determine they would be determined to be nightclub based on tripping these criteria, and then in order for them to be able to open that business, they would need council approval. That's what the conditional use would require.
In its simplest form, what a conditional use is a type of use that the local governing body deems needs an extra level of review. And in this case, it would come to council, and it's just so the elected body can make sure that the standards of the community are being met. The conditions are very clear, and if you meet the conditions, the approval are granted. It just elevates it a little bit.
Okay. I thought that was something I couldn't recall us talking about last time. So other than that, are there any other questions on this?
I just wanted to make sure I clarify and that people are watching or understand. This ordinance doesn't prohibit nightclubs from operating in Wellington, correct?
Absolutely not.
Doesn't
It
change
doesn't.
any operating hours of established businesses.
It changes nothing.
Okay. It just defines what a nightclub is if a business is operating as a nightclub.
Yes.
And once you meet those criteria and operate as a nightclub, it really imposes two requirements. One, you have to have security, and two, no one under 21 is allowed to be admitted, correct?
For the time that the business is operating as a nightclub.
Right. Since the first reading, have we received any public comments from anyone on this ordinance, specifically anyone who might qualify as a nightclub operator?
No, we haven't. And you know, we tried to be as aggressive as we could at making people aware.
We reached out.
Of the ordinance. We reached out. We sent letters. I sent a letter specifically to every business in town that had a liquor license and looked like they might, you know, meet the criteria for being a nightclub, and gave my contact information. And you know, I did receive a couple of calls, but that was it. Nobody objected to it.
Okay. And this is something that PBSO believes will help us regulate and maintain the safety of places that are operating as nightclubs.
Yes, they do.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
It is a public hearing.
I'll move to open the public
Second.
hearing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing portion is now open. Is there any public comment on the nightclub ordinance?
We have no cards.
I'll move to close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, hearing none. That motion passes. The public comment period is now closed. Is there a motion on the ordinance?
I'll move to approve on second reading, ordinance 2019-03.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, hearing none. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know there's a lot of back work that's been done up to this point, so I appreciate that.
Okay, and we appreciate your adoption of the ordinance. Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the end of public hearings and to the regular agenda. And item on the regular agenda is a discussion of outside legal fees and costs.
These are legal fees that have been budgeted for outside counsel, but when we reach a point where the payment to outside counsel is going to exceed $25,000, we require council approval. I have provided you with a breakdown of the amounts incurred by law firm, and you should have that in your amendments packet. And we are currently on track to be right at about our budgeted number of $200,000 for outside legal.
And that's fiscal year ending in September.
Correct, it's for the fiscal year.
So this is just simply, this is already budgeted.
Absolutely.
And this is simply because some of these invoices have exceeded the spending policy that this has come to us.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
All of this is budgeted, and of course, you never can predict in any given year exactly how much you're going to be spending on outside litigation. We do try to do as much as we can in-house, but, you know, there are certain areas of expertise that we just need to, have outside counsel for.
And we've supported that as a policy, so
Correct.
we want to have.
Sure, I mean, there's some very specialized things on the list here. Foreclosures, small
cell
cell
ordinance,
wireless,
yeah.
title review.
Very intricate, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Correct.
do we need a motion? We do need a motion on this?
Yes,
To
to approve the outside legal costs.
Is there a motion on this?
I'll move to approve the continued use of outside professional legal costs
Up to,
up to the amount of $90,000 requested through September 30th, 2019.
is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, hearing none. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Cohen?
All right, that brings us to the end of the agenda, and this is the point at which we would normally take additional public comment. We have no additional cards and no public forum cards.
Okay.
So that brings us to the attorney's report.
Just one thing, I will be out of town next week, and Ms. Bosch will be covering the agenda review, which has been moved up to Thursday as a result of the holiday. So she'll cover agenda review, but I'll be back for the meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Mr.
The
Schofield?
next regular council meeting will be held here on Tuesday, May the 28th at 7 p.m. Due to the Monday holiday, the agenda review meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May the 23rd at 4 p.m. in conference rooms 1E and F. And just as a reminder, council will be holding only one meeting in June, June 25th. The June 11th meeting has been canceled. Village offices will be closed on Monday, May the 27th in observance of Memorial Day. The Memorial Day Parade will take place on Monday, May the 27th at Village Hall at 8:15 and proceed to the Veterans Memorial, where the ceremony will begin at 8:30. The pool will be closed to the public from 3 p.m. on Friday, May the 17th through Saturday, May the 18th, as the Aquatics Complex will be hosting a swim meet. And then project graduation will be held at Palm Beach Central High School on Tuesday, May 21st, and at Wellington High School on May the 22nd. They'll actually be using the gym for their project graduations. Oh, and as we're on the pool, one of the things that we had not had for a while was a master swimming program, and that has returned.
Which is good news.
Oh, and last thing, I promise, I'm going to be out on Friday.
Very well. Speaking of the master's program, could we do a little PSA about that to kind of help it out? I mean, having a program restart that was at once very popular, could we add that in our PSAs? And
Yes, ma'am, assuming, of course, that you're willing to do the PSA for us.
I am. I don't have a swim cap, but
We'll get you one.
I will jump in a pool, and Michael will buy me one. So there we
I think
go.
it's appropriate because two of your children have been some of our better lifeguards.
Yes, well, there's that, and honestly, we did hear some pushback when the program was discontinued. So having the public know that it's back in place and that we've got it going again, I think is important to try to help it out because it was once a very strong program.
Do you want to tell people what the master's program is now while you have
The
the mic in
master's
case someone's watching?
program is adults who swim, adults swimming.
It
So
would be adults more in my demographic than
Right.
perhaps yours.
So, but even yet, it's for adults swimming competitively at a point with training. So, and the pool is available for that again. So it's good news. I think I got myself in a bathing suit on video, so I'm not going to be.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I'm not going to be eating anything for the next 3 weeks or however long it takes. All right, that's it for you, Mr. Schofield. Did you announce the Memorial Day process of the parade? What time the parade would start?
Yeah, it starts here at
Okay.
8:15, and it will go from here to, you will walk from here to the Veterans Memorial, and then it'll start there at 8:30. Usually we're closer to 8:45.
And Mr. Vice Mayor, I apologize, but again, I will be out of town that weekend, so you're going to be Master of Ceremonies for the Memorial Day.
Okay.
So I know you guys did a great job without me last year, and unfortunately, that's the only time I can find to get away, so I won't be here. So,
You'll be missed.
thank you. All right, any comments from the council? Tanya?
I just want to say we have our graduation coming up for our high schools, Palm Beach Central and Wellington High School next week, and I think we're going to be in attendance there to shake the kids' hands as they walk across the stage, and just wanted to say congratulations to all of them. And on a sad note, Wellington High School did lose one of their chemistry teachers, Mrs. Thomas, and I just wanted to give my condolences to the family and to Wellington High School. And tonight they had a memorial service for her at the high school, and I know a lot of her former students, my daughter being one of them, attended, and just very sad news, but deepest condolences. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman McGovern?
I too want to congratulate all of the graduates from Palm Beach Central and from Wellington High School who will be graduating next week. And particularly, I also want to congratulate their parents because I know that is, in most cases, a family achievement, as it would be at my house. And then my last thing, I want to congratulate you, Madam Mayor, on a successful year as president of the Palm Beach County League of Cities. I know we will be celebrating that next week and welcoming Councilman Hamara from Royal Palm Beach, who will be taking over in that role. So congratulations to you both.
Thank you. Yeah, because that meeting starts kind of close to the ending of graduation, I'm still involved in the beginning of that meeting. So I won't be at Wellington High School's graduation, but just because of the timing of the passing the gavel.
And we will
But
be running
we
to
will
that
be
meeting.
coming
I
from
know
there
you're going to
to
be running,
be
but
with you.
so, and I'm hoping everyone can make it, but in the meantime, because of my duties at the beginning, I'm not going to be at graduation. So my apologies to Ms. Hayden, and let her know it wasn't anything other than I had something I had to do. So, Mr. Vice Mayor?
I will also pre-congratulate all of our graduating high school seniors. I'll echo the comments. Mayor, good job on a great year as President of League of Cities. I'm sure you'll miss it, perhaps.
Maybe not.
Perhaps not.
Maybe not.
And I look forward to seeing a great turnout at Memorial Day. That's
Very,
it.
very well. And I have enjoyed my year. I don't want to sound negative on that, but it has been a lot for me this year. There's been a lot of moving parts, and I did take on way too much in this past year. So I'll be glad to have Mr. Hamara take that on. But knowing that we did accomplish a lot, we got a lot done this year with the league. And that brings me to a question, Mr. Schofield. We received an email saying that someone had received the Home Rule Award from the Home Rule Hero Award from League of Cities, and you couldn't tell who it was from because the way our emails are masked, and I didn't want to ask if it was me, but I did want to know if it was me.
It was.
Chevelle Newbin has had that award previously, so it's a great award to have, but in the meantime it could have been not me. So I struggle with the way our email works in that regard, because when I asked who it was sent to, supposedly it was sent to 15 people. I still don't think that we're getting drilled down properly on that. We should be able to tell who emails are coming to.
You should be able to, and I've talked to Mr. Sullivan about that, and we should have that resolved.
Okay.
But if it's to you and a copy to everybody else, you should be able to see that.
Yeah, we should have, but when the list came out, it was.
I have blind carbon copies, so you can't tell who it comes to. That's the problem.
But they didn't blind copy it.
Well, then it wasn't addressed to anybody, though. That was how we can't tell.
Or the list of 14 people they gave me wasn't true. It was one or the other, because I asked who was that sent to, and it was 14 email addresses at the village. So either if it was blind, then it would be the answer is nobody, I can't tell. But instead, I got an answer of it was these 14 people. So it's one or the other, and it should be a way to know the difference. So I'm just, again, I know it's confusing, but I didn't want to be presumptuous, but I am also glad to have gotten that. So it's been a lot of hard work. Mr. Schofield, there was an email also that came in from a gentleman very near my community asking about fireworks. And as we approach July 4th, we constantly have this problem. We put signs up, the tent signs, which are not my personal favorites, but we put tent signs up in the equestrian community to say fireworks are illegal by state law, which they are, but they're also illegal throughout. So is there any way we could get some information out? Because it's stressful to residents, it's stressful to pets. We have people with PTSD that have extreme reactions to fireworks. So, and I know it's fun because, again, I'm from Indiana, and, it's fun to light things on fire, but in fact, it's illegal and it's dangerous. So if we could try to get that out there, just to be kind to our neighbors.
And just to prove that Mr. Barnes is listening back there, he just sent me a thing saying he's already working on that with Public Works and with PBSO. We're going to try to do that. We'll
Okay.
put some more information out.
Okay.
And do some social media things as well.
Very well. And if the tent signs are the only way we have to do it, I'll withhold my judgment on tent signs if that's all we can do. Roads in Saddle Trail, I had someone ask me about the dirt roads on Rolling Rock. I know that we're getting some crazy weather. So who do they call? If somebody asks me.
Dennis Flaherty at Public Works, there is a line there. They're being graded as often as we can grade them. The other road we've been having a problem with is the Shell Rock part of 50th.
Okay. So The website's working again for the complaints on there. There's a thing at the bottom
I
that you
believe so.
can
I'll check.
report. Is that all functioning again?
That part is the only thing that I know, the only part of the website that's not functioning is those things that rely on, strictly on PDFs.
Okay.
But those are, and I'll check on that again.
And I'm sad to say Mr. Councilman Drehaus isn't here tonight. I was going to ask him how many birdies and bogeys he got in his golf tournament, if anybody knows how many rounds he...
I think
They played,
you go ahead.
as I understand it, they played 92 holes before the weather. That was last Monday, which was the day with incredible
Extreme,
weather in the late afternoon. So I think they got 92 holes in. They played from the very crack of dawn, and
He's out because he's having his arms reattached.
yes,
So he's not here tonight because...
Quite exhausted.
Right. No, he's actually out of town for another good reason. But hats off to him for doing that for Special Olympics. I am glad to hear that he made it through 92. That's pretty good. I'm impressed right there. So also in the morning, I'll be at Wellington Elementary doing the walk or ride your bike to school day. So
I'll be there too.
You're going to make it?
I don't have court anymore, so I'll be there in the morning.
Very well. And I'm planning on walking.
I'll bring my bike. You can walk. You take the walkers. I'll take the bikers.
There you go. That we conquered and divided very well. So I'll see you over there in the morning, and I appreciate them doing that. It's quite fun. They had to move it around because of testing, so we try to accommodate what we can on that. All right. So thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.